Welcome to They Not Like Us, the podcast that explores life in any way the journey takes us. What's the niche? There is no niche. Well, I guess we are the niche. We are conversation chameleons who follow the conversation wherever it may take us. Catch us live on Facebook and Twitch, or listen to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Aaron. Today with me I have Faris. Faris, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're all about, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, hello, Aaron, and hello, listeners, watchers, whoever. It's a real pleasure to be with everybody today. My name is Faris Aranki, as the title at the bottom of the screen says, if you can see a title. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Shia Ghetto Consulting. Shia Ghetto is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone. Does that give you any clues what I do? Probably not. But we, at Shia Ghetto, we sharpen other human beings. Right, we sharpen teams and businesses. How do we do that? We get in the middle of them and we facilitate them to work better together, make better decisions. It's super fun, super impactful. I started this business 5 years ago. It was built off the back of 12 years of being a strategy consultant, so a big brain for hire. A long time before that, I used to work in the energy industry. And a long time ago, Aaron, I was a school teacher. I used to teach secondary school. So had a few experiences, thoroughly enjoyed everything I've done, and absolutely loving what I'm doing today, and looking forward to talking a bit about it and sharing some of my experiences.
Yeah, you've got a really interesting background there. What's actually led you through that path to where you are today? What's got you from being a school teacher to now consulting with businesses?
Curiosity is the biggest thing, right? Keep exploring, keep discovering. It's kind of an ethos that drives a lot of what I do in life. I always look back and reflect. I'm also very analytical like that. So what did I learn from that? What can I apply to the next thing I'm doing? And I guess where I am today is I've packaged all those things together. So it might seem like quite a hop, skip and a jump kind of a career, but actually I've been leveraging each of those skills to get to and to do the work that we do today. And yeah, it's just that continue to be curious. I love reading stuff, going, oh, let's see if that would work in the real world, and then giving it a go, and perpetually doing that with the teams that I work with and my own business.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's a hop, skip, and a jump, but looking at your background, with policing, that's helping people. You've got school teacher, that's coaching people, developing people. You've got journalism, that's bringing important key bits of information and picking things out. And imagine that's all them skills together is really, really useful in consulting and makes you probably, as successful as you are today because of it.
100%. And to fill in the gaps for people listening, watching, I didn't mention those jobs, so when I transitioned from teaching into the corporate world, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, like many people. So I thought I'd just try different things. So I did try my hand at journalism. I did try my hand at the police. Decided those for different reasons weren't for me, but you're right. They taught me valuable things about that I apply in the work that I do today, both in terms of the mindset, but the actual approach. I'm really grateful for all those different experiences. And I always tell people at the start of their career, just explore more, right? Even if you think you know what you want to do, you don't know what you don't know. So go out, try stuff. Even if you're in a company, stick your hand up to move around, try a completely different role. Now I would say that because I'm the kind of idiot who does that to myself in my own personal life, right? I'll start brushing my teeth with my left hand for a month, even though I'm right-handed, just to mix things up. Because why not, right? But you don't have to be that extreme. But a little bit of exploration will unlock a lot of amazing things.
Yeah, I can see that, and I agree with that. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet, so we'll figure that out as we go along.
Neither do I, buddy. But people think I do.
Yeah, that's it. So obviously, you said you've done all the jobs, you've gone into the corporate world. What was the tipping point that made you think, right, I want to do it for myself? I want to go into entrepreneurship and be my own boss, do my own thing.
Yeah, so I'd spent 12 years in consulting firms, and on the face of it, I'd reached the pinnacle. I'd made partner, right, which is one of the top positions. So you have the title, you have the salary. It turns out that once you reach pinnacle, there's just another pinnacle above you, right? So suddenly I discovered there was more ladders to climb. And I began working with a coach at this point in my career, and started to explore, actually, was I enjoying the job? Because to keep going up to the next ladder, it was a big, it was asking a lot of you in terms of commitment. And so enjoyment is a key thing to, are you satisfied in what you're doing? And while you might have the title and you might have the thing, I realized I wasn't enjoying it anymore, right? More than that, I wasn't using the skills that I'd developed. I'd sort of morphed into something else. But if I hadn't had some external help to see that, I probably would still be on the treadmill. So once that was sort of opened up the Pandora's box in my head of, okay, maybe I'm not happy. What would make me happy is the naturalness, what would I enjoy more? And the more I picked away at it, I worked out what I enjoyed doing. And crucially, it became more clear that I had this vision. And my coach said to me, well, why don't you build it? Right? Before that point, I had not thought at all about creating my own company, but it seemed to make logical sense the more we explored it. So that was it. 6 months later, I handed in my notice. I'd leapt, and I just decided, it was just me in a room with a piece of paper. I was like, I'm going to make this work.
How did that feel sort of emotionally? That must have been a scary thing to take that safety net away and just to throw yourself into it.
Super bloody scary. If I had a graph, and I did actually write a blog about this, and I did a graph because I'm a mathematician at heart, analytical. I was like, my first year being an entrepreneur, the chart looked like this, right? And people aren't going to say it started off like super excited, so it went up, then plateaued a bit because the initial excitement wears off and nobody gives a damn and nobody's actually interested in your company. And then you find your first person who is willing to buy your product or buy your services. You go super excited, you get a second client, you're like, I've nailed this. Then you hit that plateau again, right? And then my graph went because COVID hit. Right, I started 6 months before COVID, and what happened? All my clients evaporated. I only had 4 at the time, but worse than that, had 7 months of no work, absolutely no work. So this big thing I'd built up emotionally, and like, I'm getting the hang of this, just evaporated, just obliterated. So it was 7 months of, oh shit, why did I quit that high-paying job? And right now they'd be paying me a salary, I'd be on furlough. So it was a really, really up and down first year.
Yeah, that must have been a real challenge to get through that. Did you? There must have been moments where you thought about just quitting and getting a job again. In that,
I did. Yeah, I'll be honest, but you think back to that time, and it's easy to forget that time. Nobody was hiring, right? There weren't jobs. You could have become a delivery driver. And I know a lot of people who did, right? But what if I go back when I started the journey? I was financially in an okay place. So I made a commitment to myself, which was the worst case scenario. I said, if you go a whole year without generating any money, are you comfortable with that? I said, yes. Right. So I already knew, and I'd already banked some money from this venture. So actually I was in a better place than my worst case scenario. So that was often what got me through. It was like, hey, actually, you're doing better than it could have been. So let's keep going.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that you need to go in with that kind of mindset, but also like you need to prepare for the worst. And then if the best happens, then brilliant, rather than prepare for the best and not be prepared for the worst. And that's when people tend to fail or give in and fall apart, from my experience.
Yeah. I, as a strategist, when I work with clients, I say we learn the most from the extremes. Right, so test your strategy in the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. Everything else is in between, and we don't really learn much in the middle. Like, we're going to launch this new product. Let's imagine it does okay. Well, that's great, right? But let's actually imagine it's going to be terrible and nobody's going to buy it. Well, let's imagine it goes off the scale to the point that we can't supply it quick enough. Because those are really interesting questions, much more than it does okay. Right? And so it's the same with your own personal life, right? Imagine the extremes. If you're comfortable with both ends of the extreme, then anything in between naturally will be fine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's similar to sort of traders and big investors. I don't know if you know much about trading or investing, but they a lot of the biggest ones and most successful ones will stay. It's about longevity, about being able to stay in the game for as long as possible. So being able to endure the lows, so that then you can survive long enough to get the highs. Business, to me, in my mind, is very similar in that way. Not that I have the level of experience that you have, but it's very similar to me in that way.
Kind of Darwinian, right? Survival of the fittest. It's not the prettiest or the one who can jump the highest or whatever. It's the one who's still there throughout it all.
Yes, right? That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, Another thing I picked up on as well with you, Faris, is that you've lived in several different countries, worked in different countries and stuff. How was these experiences and experiencing different cultures and ways of life? How has that shaped your consulting and your business?
I mean, I loved it, and again, I would advocate people to get out, see more of outside their area. So I lived in some totally random places, Aaron. And I did that intentionally. So I lived in the world's most dangerous country at the time, El Salvador. I was there for a couple of years. I was in the world's poorest country. I was in Nepal. I was in Palestine. And what I loved about the experience is not only did it push me out my comfort zone, but it totally reframed how I looked at things. Because it's very easy if you come, or if you spend most of your time in one place, or you're in the same bubble where everyone thinks the same and operate, to assume that is the default. But actually get out there, you'll realize, a large part of the world does not think like that at all, which makes you much more impactful when you go into conversations with anyone, right? Because a lot of what we teach at Shia Ghetto or work with people is about flexing your style. Don't have a set, series of assumptions that you think apply to everybody, because you'll quickly be proven wrong. And the more you are adaptable, the better it'll be for everyone that you work with and your business. So really grateful and really enjoyed it. And I still love, being a fish out of the water and going and exploring cultures. Maybe not to the extreme of going and living there and living in a small village in the middle of nowhere. But still at heart, keep exploring, keep finding out, different ways of doing things.
Yeah, it must have been some experience, but there's a lot to be said about that adaptability that you talk about understanding that all these different people in different places think different ways and have different mindsets, etc. But how do you get your clients to buy into that? How do you get them to take on that adaptability? Because from my experience working with people, a lot of people can be very single-minded and very difficult to break through.
Yeah, and there's always the interesting thing. There's the academic. I get it. I understand I need to be flexible, but it's the reality of this is tough. Me being flexible, asking me to change your point of view, and I know that because I still experience it myself, right? And I teach about these sort of things. As with many things, it's what we do at Shia Ghetto or the work we do is very pragmatic, right? So it's not just hey, do you know what? You should be really flexible. I'll now leave it to you. Okay, it's a bit like telling someone, do you know what? You should really do more exercise. I'll leave it to you. No, the real way that we make change, we help them, is by making it as easy as possible. Reframing things, right? Challenge it, setting it up so that they see the other thing, right? And sometimes, there's a variety of different ways to do that. Sometimes it's showing them what they're doing in their default setting and how that's unhelpful. So, it's really useful, modern technology, that you can record everything, right? That AI summarizes everything. So like a classic thing I'll do particularly with some leaders, let's say they're very driven and they're very sort of dominant, right? I'll say to them, how much do you think you spoke in that meeting? You just had a meeting with your team. It was an hour. How much do you think you spoke? What percentage of the meeting, right, compared to your team? And if they have, depending, I'm thinking of one particular person I was working with, and he said, oh, do you know what, Faris? I think I spoke about 15% of the meeting. I said, well, the great thing is AI can tell us exactly how many minutes out of the 60 you spoke, right? And so he was shocked when the data showed that he spoke for about 70% of the meeting. Literally, it was his voice only, right? And I was like, there's no way he could dispute that. I was like, I've not made that number up, right? That is generally what you're doing, right? So, are you happy with that? Not really, because there were 10 people in the room. That means I'm leaving sort of, and I was like, well, there you go. There's something. What are we going to do about it? So sometimes it's about making them more aware. Really, I call it bruising their ego or slapping them in the face, and then making it easy for them to change. So with that individual, we just applied a simple rule. I said to him, do you know what? From now on, in team meetings, you are not allowed to be the first person to speak on any topic. Right? Just that one simple rule. And anytime he stepped out of line, he had to, his team could call him out on it. Right. And he decided to put money into like a kind of a swear jar, and the team then spend it on team socials. So the first few times he'd step out of line, he'd put a tenner in, But the more it just became a habit. And do you know what? It brought that number down and it changed the dynamic in the team.
Yeah, right? That's brilliant, actually, that, yeah.
So it's doing stuff like that. So awareness is the first protocol, but then make it easy or gamify it or to do something to help them change their point of view, how they approach situations, rather than just tell them they have to do it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And like I say, the first step is that awareness, isn't it? And just being aware of what you're actually doing, because a lot of us won't be aware. Like you say, these tools are there to help us, and as long as we use them wisely, we can get a lot out of them. Do you use a lot of AI in what you do, or is that just bits and pieces here and there with...
Just bits and pieces. I should use it more. So I use it as a thought partner for both for myself and for the teams that I work with. And it's always fascinating that a lot of the senior executives that I work with will talk at length about AI, like, it's going to be the future, it's going to be really impactful. But then you discover they've never actually used it. And you're like, hang on a minute, buddy, right? To have a really good point of view on this, you got to start using it. So actually, I'll force them to use it in team meetings. So if, let's say, you and I were having a meeting and we were trying to come up with new ideas on something, I'd say, Aaron, actually, today, it is not your ideas. You're the person in control of ChatGPT, right? So you're going to have to learn how to get ideas. And actually, you'll find you'll get more ideas, but it also it's helping teach you how to learn to prompt, right? And next week, we'll rotate. The next person gets to use it, right? So that by the end of a sort of 6-week period, everyone in the senior team has had a go at it. And what we see is also we get new ideas in the room. So I use it in that sort of ways to help sort of nudge clients, help stimulate their thinking. It's a great sort of thought partner for me in terms of that. I could probably use it more for the operations side of my business as well. But, lots of small steps. I'm just as much a dinosaur as anyone else in some respect.
Yeah, and equally it's about getting the balance as well, right? And having that personal touch as well. You don't want to go too far one way. It's about getting the balance right, I think, because it can be overused as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are some amazing AIs out there, right? I'm a little bit nervous for my job. I think it's still a way off because I always talk about, what we do is bring the human into the room. But actually, some of the AIs are pretty good at doing that as well, right? Picking up on biases, picking up on where you could be more human. But I still think there's a little bit of time off. So I'm not, I don't think I need to find a new job quite.
No, I think you're good for a while. I use AI for my podcast, so okay. It'll produce the show notes for the podcast. I'll still go over them and make sure they're okay, but it'll generally produce the show notes. It'll produce the script after for me to look at and show me all the filler words and all the ums and buts that I put in, and let me take them out if I so wish. I tend to try and keep it as raw as possible because I'm just trying to be authentically me, but it's there if I wanted to do that. And the intro, so I don't know if you've ever heard any intros from my show, that the intro is AI generated. So I'll tell it what I want. It will write it in a better way, and then it will use my voice. So it's got recording of my voice. It will use my voice and recreate my voice to read that intro, and that will be that's the intro to the show. So it's quite amazing what it can do. It sounds like me, but you can also tell it's AI still at the minute. But
okay, have you used the AIU in other areas of your life? You need to reply to your mother, so you'd just give her a ring, pretend to be me.
Oh no, I'm gone that far. I'm gone that far. I think she'd know. She'd be on to me. But but I do try to use it to make my life easier with a lot of stuff.
Does the AI version of you in those intros, does it put the ums and ahs that you would put in, or it goes
no? No, it's clean. It's clean, and the only thing that's slightly different is the flow. I think the flow to my voice, the way I speak, I'm a bit mumbly. I repeat things. Yeah. I'm human, so I'm not perfect. Whereas as the AI speaks, it's almost too perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's where the issue is.
It takes me back. Right? It's a little tangent and size. During COVID, like many other people, when it had that period of no work, I started my own podcast. Right, I was like, this would be something, an activity to do. It lasted 3 episodes. So I interviewed 3 amazing guests, loved it. And then I did the editing myself. And the first one I listened back to was so full of ers and ums and things. And I said to myself, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound professional. I'm going to go through and cut them out. So I did. That took ages to stop and splice. But then when I listened back, it just sounded weird. A conversation without any ers and ums not a natural conversation. Anyway, I abandoned it after three episodes, and I changed my strategy. I am now a perpetual guest on podcasts. So much easier, so much more fun. And I admire people like you who are doing the actual hard work, or AI who is doing the hard work.
I think AI does more than I do. Ultimately, I'm just here doing the hosting, the editing. Like I say, I keep to a minimum. I do the bare minimum editing because I want it to be raw. I want it to feel natural, and that's why I go live with it as well, because then that keeps me true to it. So I can't hide from it, because then the live show goes out, the live recording is always there. So
yes,
I don't want to over edit and then take away from what it really was. I'm just trying to have authentic, real conversation. So that's my goal and my plan with it all. Maybe, who knows, in the future, maybe I'll edit a little more, but I'll never ever. I'll always keep a streak of the authenticity and the raw, at least.
Yeah.
That's what I want. So, another thing. So obviously, I've done a little bit of research, and you said, over the past 20 years, you've had sort of good stories and funny lessons and stuff through life. Is there one particular story that stands out as like a pivotal moment for you?
One particular, God, there's so many. So many have been little nudges. It's the reason I say that is, kudos to anyone who has had one epiphanic moment that has pivotally changed their lives. But I think we're all nudged by little things that happen in our life, and we only realise them later on. And actually, I did not to sort of promote another podcast, but I did a podcast a while ago, which was called the 10 Lessons Learned, which is 10 lessons from your life. And they explain the concept. They want you to pick 10 things that happened to you in life that you took great learnings from. And when I first was approached to do it, I was like, I'm not sure I've got 10 lessons in me. But when I started writing down, I had 47. And that was my first pass. And I was like, damn, actually a lot has happened in my life that really had an influence. And it's only when, really sitting thinking. And then I was like, how do I get from 47 to 10? Which are the 10 most important? So that, again, lots of challenges for this show. So, I think the single biggest, if I'm honest, was at the age of 17, going and living for a year, just over a year, in a village in Nepal. So I was working for an NGO, I was teaching English, doing development work. But the reason it was such a pivotal moment is it goes back to that point. I was in an environment that I was not prepared for, and it just changed my outlook on life. It changed me physically, it changed me emotionally, it changed me socially. So in that 1 year, such a big change. The person I came back, literally my friends were like, you are a completely different person. So, I have to attribute a lot to that. And I can tell you, within that, I can tell you loads of experiences, loads of stories that came out. And some of them are hilarious, both in terms of misunderstandings, fish out of water. My grandmother, God bless her, who's no longer with us, who grew up in Palestine, would love the stories. She would get me to tell them over and over, because she would say, oh my God, they sound even worse than us. Right. And she was like, tell that one again. Tell the one about the mother cleaning the house with cow shit. Right. And I'd be like, Gran, this is not nice to love. And she's like, it's hilarious, right? Tell that one where you got offered somebody's 14-year-old daughter because they thought you'd give her a better life back in the UK, but you misunderstood and you thought they were offering you a watch. And you were like, I don't want the watch. Take it out of my, so all these stories, just completely different. But yeah, what a great year.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I did some time abroad, nothing like that. I went to Portugal, so it's still very westernized there. So it's still, the culture is not the same, but very similar. So I didn't have that same sort of level of impact on me. But I can't imagine the difficulty of going somewhere like Nepal, somewhere so remote, really, as well, to grow up almost, because you're still growing up in that time, aren't you? You're still trying to figure out life, and
and to see Everest. I mean, every single morning when I woke up was unbelievable. It's the stuff like when you're at school, you read about it, you see videos about it. To see it, I was going to say in person. Obviously I didn't climb it. I went up to Everest, but just takes your breath away. So loads of funny things, and perhaps I will share one story. It was one that people often get, which sort of highlights that sort of not having a fixed mindset. And it was very early on. I was living with this family, and they graciously given up a room in their house for you, and so you sort of lived with them as though you were one of their family. You'd eat all your meals with them. You'd sort of hang out. So it was quite early on, and we were having dinner one night, and the mother had served us all food, and I wanted to put some more salt on my food. So I said to the father of the house, "Could you please pass the salt?" Which I'd asked, every day I'd asked for the salt, and I'd said to him, "Please, can you pass the salt?" This was like the 5th day in a row, and he suddenly erupted and he threw the salt at me. And he got very angry, and he said to me, will you stop saying please and thank you when you come and ask for the salt?" Right? Now, Western society, you're taught to say please and thank you around everything. So my head was like blown, like, why would he ask me to stop saying please and thank you, when I've asked for the salt? And he went on to explain, he said, in our culture, you use please and thank you when somebody does a really big, monumentous thing for you, like save your life, right? Like give you a kidney, right? That's what thank you is there for. He said something as simple as handing somebody else salt, that is a basic human thing. Any human being should do that. By you saying please and thank you implies that I'm a shitty human who wouldn't do that. That you actually think I am that lower level person. You're actually offending me now. And it just blew my mind because it's the opposite in the West. If you don't say it, you're rude. So I was like, okay, well, stop it immediately, right? Because he was like, you said it yesterday 7 times, you said it. I literally had to reprogram my approach to life because it was so ingrained after 17 years, right? To stop it took a while. And you know what? Hilarious? When I came back to the UK, I was so programmed, I wasn't saying please and thank you anymore. And people would go, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" Right? So it was such a valuable lesson that you cannot take even an assumption around please and thank you into a room and assume the other person will appreciate it or thinks of it the same. So the more you can be flexible and check with the other person, the more impactful you'll be in life.
Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it, that we don't even think, we take these things for granted. We don't even think of these little things and the power of language and just one word and how that can affect people in different cultures. And we can be a little bit naive to it and a little bit, insensitive to it at times. So it's an important lesson, really.
Yeah. Stuck with me. So if you hang out with me, I'll fluctuate between saying please and thank yous and not, depending on which frame of mind I'm in.
One of the things I picked up on is that you have a success formula for your clients.
Yes.
IQ, EQ, FQ. Can you explain that to me a little bit? I'm just quite intrigued about that.
Yeah. So we do have a success formula. You can spot that I used to be a maths teacher. Got to have a formula. And let me explain the formula. I can tell you some stories. Also, we had a trademark dispute over the formula. So I've also got we had a legal battle. But basically, what it says is if you want to be successful at anything in life, right, have an objective. That's where you start. If you don't have an objective, then how do you know you're going to, what you're aiming for? So let's say you've got an objective, and this could be you personally, your company, and it could be anything. You want to get fitter, you want to make this amount of money, you want to, meet this kind of person. To get there, you need 3 components. The first one is IQ, right? We're not talking Mensa IQ. IQ here stands for, have you got the best idea to get you there, right? If not, spend time improving the quality of your idea. But having a great idea is not enough, right? This is where the EQ part comes in. EQ is emotional intelligence. This is where you need to take others on the journey, right? You need others to buy into your idea and get excited by it, right? And you need those emotional skills to transfer that excitement, that engagement, right? But that's still not enough. You can have a great idea and people on board. And this is the bit that I missed for years, but the penny dropped when I started to reflect back on which companies I'd worked with have been successful and which hadn't. And it was this concept called FQ, focus quotient. Now, a lot of people won't have heard of focus quotient. It didn't exist, right? When I researched, I sort of patented the name focus quotient. But what it says is, if you have a great idea, you have people on board, the final component is you need to be super focused around that idea to deliver it, right? Don't get distracted. Don't try and do 100 things at the same time. You're not going to achieve it. So it is that ability to focus around your idea. And here's the crucial thing. You need all 3 components. Many of my clients say, don't worry, we'll be fine because we've got really high IQ in this company. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. That's why there's a multiply between each of those factors, because anything multiplied by 0 is 0. And we all know that super smart engineer who doesn't have the ability to communicate. Or we know that super outgoing, sociable person who is just lacks any focus, right? So they're not going to achieve what they always have a great idea, blah, 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 right? That's why you need these three components. And that's how we help companies. We go in and say, what are you trying to achieve? Let's look across these three pillars. Which is the biggest one holding you back? Let's work on there first.
Yeah, I like that. How do you balance the sort of almost technical aspects of like the strategy that your clients have with the softer human-centric skills that they need to have? How do you balance them getting that right?
I mean, it's an art as much as a science, right? Invariably, a lot of the clients we end up working with have over-indexed on IQ, and they've got a really polished answer or good enough answer, right? And they're not spending enough time working out how to communicate it or how to be flexible. And I think about this. As we were talking, it springs to mind. One of the founders I work with, super technical engineer. He's developed an amazing product, right? And he got an extra 10 million of funding from an investor. And his idea was to just keep building and refining that product. But actually the investor had given him the 10 million because he's like, your product's good enough now, go and sell it. But he didn't know how to sell, that wasn't his skill set. That wasn't his area of interest. He wanted to double down on the IQ part, not the getting, even internally, his team excited. So he would sit in a room just building and not talk to his team, right? Because that was not the area that he liked. So we worked with him to say, look, either you need to develop that side of you, or you need to find somebody who's willing to do it on behalf of your company, because you just sitting in a room when you've got 100 employees is not a great place to be. And you see it time and time again. I think back to my career as a consultant, all right? If you're in strategy consultant, it's like being a lawyer. You spend a lot of hours in small rooms developing analytical models, PowerPoint presentations, right? And looking back now, I laugh. We would sit in a room till 3 a.m. polishing slides, right? So that's the IQ side of things. Hey, make sure this is really neat, there's no typos. Would we spend any time rehearsing how we would present those slides, which is the EQ bit? Would we tell a funny story to start off? Would we, how would we build relationships in the room? No, right? And I once saw this in a team where we were going for a £10 million project. They spent no time rehearsing the pitch. And the feedback they got was, yeah, your slides were fine. Everyone's slides were fine. But we didn't really feel any connection with you and the team. We didn't feel you were human. So we're not going to bring you in. Right? Valuable lesson that you can't just over-index on really nice slides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And from my experience of, business and work in general, it seems to me that that EQ part is always overlooked. Like people and leaders don't understand how important it is to get a really good grasp of who your team are, what they're about, what their personal needs are, what's going on in their lives. Because that kind of level of EQ essentially is how you connect with them, how you get through to them. So you can have the best message in the world, but if you can't communicate it in a way that people are going to take it on board and buy into it, then it's all for nothing, really.
Yeah, 100%. It's just a piece of paper. I remember as a kid, it was one science class, actually, end of term. You know how at the end of the year, when you've done your exams and stuff and the teacher can't be bothered to teach you, they just put a video on, right? I know that still happens because I was a teacher and I was still there. And I remember this video. He put on a video about the greatest businessmen or inventors of the 21st century was the name of the video, right? And it was exploring like the TV, right, and the radio. So Marconi, John Logie Baird, Louis Stevenson, who created the locomotive. And what you discovered watching this video is none of them were engineers, right? They were all marketers. They were all very sociable people who had found a great idea from somebody who couldn't articulate it or didn't have the social skills and went, don't worry. Either they bought the rights to it or they went, I'll partner with you, right? And who became famous at the end of the day for selling? It was the guy who had the EQ, right? It was always the guy who had the EQ, not the IQ guy. And I remember as a kid going, I felt like annoyed on their behalf. I was like, how come they're getting the glory? But that's how history has told us. That, if you're super smart but nobody likes you, you're not going to go far.
Yeah, it seems to be the way, and this is, like I say, it's evidenced all around the world, isn't it? People who, not necessarily the people who have the best products succeed, is the ones who can send the best message or tell the best story, essentially, that gets people involved and wanting a part of it. So when you're consulting and helping your clients develop and get to where they want to be? What kind of the key habits or practices that they need to adopt to build that EQ?
So around the EQ is that curiosity, right? Is speaking less, asking more questions, listening. If there's one skill we could all improve and the world would be a better place, is our listening, right? Listen more, ask one more question, listen more, you'll be in a better place, right? Don't just dive in and go, I've got this, let me share my view as the first starting off point. A bit like the guy we're giving an example. Because even if you are the most, empathetic person, the simple fact of you always starting off with your view just begins to limit the EQ in the room. Less people think they need to bother speak, or that you won't listen to them anyway. So just listening more is a key skill to develop your EQ muscle, right? And alongside it, it's that ability to flex. So we work with a lot of leaders around flexing their style because they find it hard. Most people in life have one natural style that they're very, very, very comfortable with. And do you know what? Their style will probably work 80% of the time. But you will one day meet someone who does not like that style, or it doesn't work. Now, what do you do then? Now, a really good leader can instantly flex into another style without the person realizing and get through that way. But if you haven't worked on that style, it's a bit like a muscle, right? If you have to switch to a muscle you've never used, you're not going to be able to lift any weights with that muscle. So that's another key area that we help people with their emotional intelligence, being able to naturally move between styles.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually, and I can sort of really align myself with that because I have a very particular style myself that I know I do, and I have it difficulty in adapting or changing that style. So what advice would you give someone like me to get that ability to do that, really?
It's a bit so practice, right? Practice in a safe environment. It's a bit like my friend who taught me recently. He's super into AI, and when I was explaining I don't use AI enough, he said, Faris, there's a simple way. For the next 2 weeks, do every task AI first. Literally, whatever you're about to do, go and use an AI as your first port of call. So what I mean by flex your style, for the next 2 weeks, right? Pick a style that is not your natural style and have every conversation in that style. No matter how clunky it is, no matter how weird the other person looks at you, right? Maybe you don't want to do it in a high pressure work situation, but certainly with your friends and family, switch the style you use with them. If you're always been known as a logical person, for the next 2 weeks, become a visionary, someone who tells stories all the time instead of using logic. Your friends will think it's super weird, but do you know what? That's how you overcome and you develop your storytelling skill. Right? If you're a natural storyteller, spend 2 weeks being a very direct talker. Right? Again, inside you might be like, oh, I hate this. I hate, but you will pick up that skill because sometimes you need to be super direct. Right? There's no point being in a burning building telling people stories about why they should leave the burning building. You're like, let's all get out the building now. Right? That's what they need from you at that point in time. So people often go, yeah, but I won't need that skill. You will need that skill at some point, right? So might as well start developing it.
Yeah, I like that. It's definitely something I need to work on, and I'm sure it's something that lots of people need to work on. Hence why you've got a successful business helping people with these things. So
yeah, and you know, I was super fortunate, although at the time I hated it. I had a boss early on in my career, right, who I hated at the time. He taught me about these style things. And he said, Faris, you don't know which room you're about to enter. You don't know what style the people in that room will want. So to help you, I'm going to get you to prepare each of our presentations in the 4 different styles. So each project, I didn't have just one piece of work to do. I had to replicate it in 4 different ways. So it was 4 times the amount of work. And I was like, why are you making me do this? There's so much extra work. He said, you will thank me later in life because I'm making you do all those reps now. And that's why today I can effortlessly move between styles, because that boss was such a douche to me, but really nice. It was like Mr. Miyagi. He was forcing me to do wax on, wax off so many times that it became natural. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but so that's my tip to people. Don't wait for a boss to help you, force you to learn this skill. Try and find ways to accommodate it in your day-to-day life.
It's interesting that when they're hard on you, at the time you hate it, but afterwards you really appreciate that actually they've done this for my benefit, and now I'm I'm better for it.
Maybe he's listening to this podcast and he's like, no, I just did it to dick you about.
just wanting to be a jerk.
Yeah, basically.
So I take it you work across lots of different industries, Faris?
Yeah.
Are there some common themes and stuff across the different industries that you...
It really depends on how the industry is doing. So if the industry in general is not performing well, so we might take retail, for example, at the moment, or tech companies, then what happens is there's more stress and more bad behaviors come out. People's listening abilities, people get shorter with each other. The other factor that seems to play is the size of the company. We work with big corporates, some big names you would have heard of, the likes of Amazon, Heineken, Tesco. And we also work with startups, right? And usually what I say is the big corporates, we have to spend more time overcoming their culture. They've got these big ingrained cultural problems that are stopping them being successful, right? Whereas in the smaller firms, usually the culture is great. It's 4 founders, they all know each other, they've been uni mates. Their problem is focus, right? There's too much to do, but their ego's going, well, we can do all this. They really need to strip back and go, do you know what? We're only going to do these 2 things. We're going to do them super well. Instead of launching in the US at the same time as building our second product, we've got to pick between those 2. And they find that really hard because nobody wants to say no to stuff, particularly if you're on the up. So that it's more around size and how the industry is doing overall that leads to the patterns rather than saying all companies of this type have this problem.
Yeah, fair enough. So your consulting firm,
yeah.
What's on the horizon for it? Do you have any new projects coming up or any areas that you're excited to explore? Or
Yeah, so we are just reaching our 5th birthday, which I researched the other day. Less than 50% of companies make it to their 5th birthday, so I'm super chuffed. Incidentally, I also researched another fact. You are 200 times more likely, Aaron, to become a Premiership footballer than you are to start a unicorn business. Right? Did you know? Right? So
I'm not surprised.
And so I was like, that gave me comfort that I'm not beating myself up, that I'm not going to, build a unicorn. So yeah, we're 5 years in. Why is that important? I work in 5-year cycles. So it feels like it's the end of the first chapter of Shia Ghetto. And the next chapter is super exciting. We've reached a really nice level with a great small team, a great bunch of clients. Now it's about formalizing that and taking us to the next level. So I see the next 5 years growing us into a team of about 30, having a stable portfolio of clients, having a permanent office. So it doesn't feel like it's a kind of a made up company, as my dad says to me sometimes. And it's not just about me, it's a brand. It is Shia Ghetto first rather than Faris first. So super exciting. And we've got the platform now because of the first 5 years, great client base, great revenues. I'm super excited where that will take us and what it will lead to.
Yeah, it's a massive achievement actually, and being keeping a business going for 5 years, people might just not think much of it, but when you look at the statistics, the amount of businesses that fail, a lot of them within the first 2 years, let alone 5. It's rather incredible. So, congratulations on that. Well done.
Thank you very much. It takes me back to about a year ago. I did an accelerator program for the company. I did, sponsored by a big bank, high street bank, and they pick 100 companies that for that year they're going to support. And 95 of the companies were tech companies, tech startups. There was only 5 of us that were services companies. So I was very privileged to be picked. Anyway, and they wheeled out on day one someone very senior in the bank, and she stood in front of us and as an opening speech I'll never forget, she said, "Congratulations on making it onto this accelerator course. In a year from now, 86 of you won't exist. In 2 years from now, another 10 won't exist." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is." I was like, it felt like, "Well, are we going to die?" I was like, but those were the stats, and it was clearly a terrible way, lack of EQ way of explaining the stats. But it was very powerful because it stuck in everyone's mind, and it was like, "Wow, this is like Hunger Games now." But those are the stats of tech companies. Most of them do not last 2 years.
Yeah, unfortunately. Is there anything you would have done differently in your journey, looking back?
Yeah, do you know, I was quite. As much as it's a bit like the looking back and the hindsight of being a thing, that break for COVID, as painful as it was for the time, allowed me to reset a couple of things that I was doing wrong in the company. And so might have been grateful to have done that sooner. Learn your lessons, because there are a lot of lessons we just don't choose to pay attention to them sometimes. So what I mean by that, a key lesson I learned was I was being too salesy in conversations, right? So I would, in the first 18 months of the business, I would turn up to every meeting and assume I had to push my products, my services. Go, yeah, I've just set up a company. You realize the person on the other side of the table doesn't give a damn that you've just set up a company, right? Well done for you, buddy. Even if they're your mate, they get bored of it very quickly. And it's only when you sit back and reflect, you go, why is nobody interested? Why is nobody buying? Because you're just shoving it down their throat too much, and that's not you. So making that switch earlier would have been massively beneficial. And also would have, because of that, I think I jeopardized a few of my friendships, because in the early days when it was tough and I had no clients, I would naturally ring up the people I was closest to and go, come on, buy some work. And I began to piss a few of them off, right? Like, can we not just, So I wish I'd sort of clocked that a little bit earlier, but better late than never, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a difficult part of business, and a lot of people do it because you are keen and you do want to help people and get that first sale or get sales going. But it's getting that balance between, shoving it down people's throats and actually just kind of softly promoting it and saying, this is what I can do to help you, sort of thing. Is a big difference. And a lot of people get that wrong, I think. So it's not just you. It just takes a bit of practice, a bit of learning, doesn't it?
It does. It's park your ego, park your agenda sometimes. It's one step back to go two steps forward. And, I have a tongue-in-cheek mantra that I say to people we're working with on strategy is, strategy is really easy apart from three characteristics of human beings. Is 1, human beings are lazy. 2, human beings are selfish, and 3, human beings are easily distracted. But you can make any strategy fly as long as you accommodate those 3 factors. It is tongue-in-cheek, but there is a resonance of truth there, that if I go into a meeting just focused on me, I'm going to get very little out of it, right? And there was a beautiful moment, and I often remember this, is like years ago when it was my best friend's wedding and I was best man. I decided, because he was my best friend of so many years, I would go the hard yards and not just write a speech. I made a video for him where I spent 3 months going around the country interviewing all his friends and family and getting their thoughts about him together, getting old home movies, splicing together a video. Now, you can imagine over 3 months, I interviewed over 100 people. I had hours of footage, right? And I had to get that hours of footage down into no more than 5 minutes. So the final cut, a lot of people didn't make their contributions. And so when I showed this on the day and everyone watched it and there were tears and there were a round of applause, I thought, brilliant, I've done my job. But afterwards, people came up to me and went, that was a great video. Why did you cut me out? Right? And I was like, hang on a minute, it's not about you. Today's not your special day. And they're like, yeah, but I gave you, I gave up 20 minutes of my day. I gave up half an hour of my day and I put makeup on and yet you cut me out. How dare you? And I realized it just reminded me that people always look for themselves first in anything before they go up, even on a special happy day.
Yeah, you got to appeal to that self-interest, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
It's got to be done. Okay, I've asked this to all my guests so far, so I'm going to keep going with it. If there's one piece of advice they could give a younger you, what would it be?
I've already said listen more, but don't be in such a rush, right? When I was younger, and I think this applies to a lot of people, everything, you feel you have to achieve everything tomorrow, otherwise it's the end of the world. And I look in my career, I was like, I have to get that promotion this year, otherwise, I'm falling behind everyone else. I have to get it, nail down this relationship now, because otherwise it won't. And you realize later on in life that things are a marathon, not a sprint, and things even out. And actually, all that focus, while it might have brought some short-term benefits, what costs did it bring? And so I just tell myself to calm down, that everything will be fine in the future. So you don't need to be sprinting all the time or as much as you did and thinking it was life and death.
I like that. That's good advice. Very conscious of time because I know you've got other commitments, Faris. So yes, what I'll do is I'll just rattle through these quick questions here.
Okay.
And then we'll finish it up. All right.
Is that okay with you? Short and sweet version of this.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. But Stephen Bartlett, eat your heart out. 2.5 hours. Do it like the rest of us.
I don't want to rule it out because I might have you back on to make up because there's still things I want to know.
Sure.
But I've got some little almost quick fire questions to ask you before we round it up. So they're pretty straightforward. What's one book that you believe everybody should read?
For me, I love Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Really explains how the brain works.
Love that book. A lot of time for that book, actually. Read that myself. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
My dad used to say to us when we were kids, stop being so British. We're dual culture. And he was like, you've over-indexed on one of your cultures. Stop being, what he meant by that is don't just conform to how others do. He meant it tongue-in-cheek, like we don't queue some, we don't take the first price, and all these things actually channeling the other's culture sometimes helps break impasses and allows me to be flexible. So don't be so British, not in a sort of anything to do with race. It's just about reminding you that you are more than just one way of approaching something.
I love that. Love that a lot. That's actually, obviously, with your heritage and your background, having that other culture to draw from as well is really powerful. And I think, it's important that you do use that.
Yeah.
So it's very good. Very good. If you could have one dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I think there's so many fascinating people, right? And I get fascinated by the duality in people. Someone like Rosa Parks, right? A big inspiration for the sort of end of segregation in the US. But she was vilified before, So how do you deal with being seen as both a saint and a sinner and doing such a small act and having such a massive impact? So I'd love to chat to someone like her over a dinner to even realize, did she realize at the time how much impact and wave she would send, or she was just a woman sitting on a bus?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. It's very thought-provoking that to find, it was a massive thing, but was it intended to be a massive thing? Was it
exactly,
just...
right?
Yeah. So my last one for you then, Faris. What's something that people would be surprised to learn about yourself?
Oh dear, how much do I reveal? I often say people are often surprised. I can go for positive that I've. Nice one is that I've been in a UK billboard campaign, but far more surprising is that I've been detained by the police on 3 different continents. And I may have been held in a police station on all 3 times. But I should state, I was not guilty of anything. It was all a misunderstanding each time. But it does surprise people when they discover that not only did I work for the police, I actually spent time as a member of the community in police stations.
I bet that was a challenging time.
Well, those are stories for to reveal next time when you have me on for part 2. Always leave a hook for next time.
Definitely, I love it. Where can people find more about you and find you if they want to get in touch with you, Faris?
So 2 great places. One, come and visit the company website, shiaghetto.com. We'll put the spelling of that in the show notes. And the other place is LinkedIn, right? There's only one Faris Aranki on LinkedIn. I post every day. I respond to every message. It's a great place to carry on the conversation. I share tips around each of the 3 pillars. So come and find me, and I'd love to chat.
Brilliant. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have you back, because now I need to know what you were almost in trouble for.
Well, thanks for having me. And for listeners, Aaron has done his own miraculous recovery to be on this show, from his own illnesses. So real pleasure to be able to record this, and look forward to part 2.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks.